Well, I suppose we should start talking about 18 Alpha then, since I'm currently going through the Kettlebell for Jiu-Jitsu program by 18 Alpha Fitness himself, Coach Kevin Edgerton. So Coach Edge, he's awesome. He's got an app that is super duper legit, and it's completely focused on getting you through any selection. That's Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, FBI, SWAT, whatever it is that you're going to go through and you need to be physically prepared for. Coach Edge has got you. So go over to 18 Alpha Fitness. It's easiest to find him on Instagram. Throw our code in at checkout with his program, whatever program it is you want to take on and get in the best shape of your life. So go to 18 Alpha Fitness over on Instagram. Use the code ONESREADY, so the number 1 and the word ready. Use it at checkout for a sweet discount. It comes with video coaching. Kevin hits me up every single time I finish a workout. Kevin puts a note in the chat. Hey, how do you like it? Can I improve it at all? It's been amazing. He takes feedback. He's completely changing the app. He's almost got it figured out where it like talks to your Whoop and has all of your biometrics that's in there too. And he's got all the other stuff that you can hook up through your smartwatch or whatever. It's fantastic. Easy to use app, videos of every single exercise, and it is a smoker. So you can literally tell him, hey, I have this much time during the day. He designs a program for you to crush. If you don't have equipment, you just tell him when you do your intake, you just say, hey, I don't have this set of equipment. He makes a bunch of different substitutions for you. So go over to 18 Alpha Fitness, hit up Coach Edge, and get in the best shape of your life. Get ready for whatever selection you want. Or if you just want to look really, really good, he can help you with that too. So that's code ONESREADY, the number 1 ready at checkout over to 18 Alpha Fitness.
But if you don't have the equipment, you need a place to go get it. You can check out GrayManGear.com by BeaverFit. So BeaverFit, they're doing all the containers, and they're doing some high-end military workout gym stuff. They've got the trailer that they're
out of nowhere.
Yeah. They really have blown up. Like it.
Yeah.
I remember seeing the kind of garage container kind of workout gym several years ago, and then I mean, everywhere you go now on base. I remember seeing them on JBLM when I was up there. Army bought a ton of them. I know that out of the 2-2, like they've been out to visit, they're looking to revamp that entire gym there. So BeaverFit's blown up, big in the military game, military fitness. But for that, they have Gray Man Gear line, which are your medicine balls, your slam balls, barbells, barbell plates, the bumper plates. Kettlebells. They even have a couple of the, if you don't need that big container, they actually have, Gray Man has their own BeaverFit kind of pull up, squat rack, that kind of stuff that are all on GrayManGear.com. So hit them with the promo code ONESREADY, get yourself a discount. It's all high end gear. So they are becoming the standard for military fitness gear. And I not just military, because, there's other people that are using it, but the military, I would say, probably has brought them on the map, because we just love being able to have a Connex or a small container, for people that don't know what a Connex or an ISU is, that is palletized, and being able to just roll it onto an aircraft, roll it off, and now we've got a gym. So it's pretty sweet. So GrayManGear.com, promo code ONESREADY. And now on to Colonel Russel Bones Cook. He is the 23rd Wing Commander out of Moody Air Force Base. We're out here. Later, enjoy.
Late.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the ONESREADY podcast. You're in the team room. We've got Trent and Aaron with us, and then we've got a special guest, Colonel Russel Bones Cook. Appreciate you joining us, sir.
Hey, Peaches. Thanks, man. It's good to be here with you guys.
Absolutely. So, brief intro for everybody that's out there. You are the 23rd Wing Commander out at Moody Air Force Base in Georgia. You've got a whole bunch of people under your care. You've got 60s, you've got PJs, you've got A10s, you've got defenders, and then all the rest of the folks that are on base that are helping support the mission. Man, better you than me.
That's good. The brag here is that we have the largest A-10 force in the world and the largest rescue force in a single geographic location. So Flying Tigers are busy, and it's a good place to be.
Yeah, exactly. No, anytime 60s, A-10s, and PJs are involved, it's going to be a good day, right?
It can't be bad, except for the enemy.
Yeah. So you guys are focused on a lot of different things. One in particular, especially since you've got A10s doing a Sandy mission. You've got PJs doing the personnel recovery, and you've got the 60s that are also, part of that rescue triad. You guys are trying to get after a whole bunch of stuff, and now we're out of Afghanistan, out of Iraq, so a lot of that CSAR is kind of not gone, but it's not as heavily invested. So we've got some challenges coming forth, if you will. So what does that kind of look like from your purview in terms of how you are organized training and equipping right now? And I'm purposely not saying a country for reasons.
Well, I'll quote the Secretary of the Air Force if that's all right. And China is where our head's at. On the combat rescue side specifically, we're still deployed in a lot of places you guys have been for the counter violent extremist organizations. So what we've realized is that we have to be full spectrum ready. We've been really good in the last 20 years on the counter VEO side, but we need to be better at the peer competition side. And so a lot of focus has gone into that with both the attack and the rescue, how to use an A10 in that fight. We just got back from the Pacific in October of last year. We went out there and challenged some of the concepts that the A10 could do. And rescue as well. We brought rescue, HC-130s and pararescue out there to operate out of Palau and do some island chain combat rescue solutions that we thought that were on PowerPoints, and we want to get out there in the real world and do them a little bit. And so we're definitely focused on that far right side of the spectrum, the peer competition piece of the spectrum. And conceptually, if we train to the hardest possible fight, we'll be able to do all the fights along the spectrum. But that's where our focus is at right now. We're always working new concepts, and we've got the new helicopter, H-60 Whiskey, we just got online. I don't know this for a fact, but I think it's the first Air Force program to execute on timeline and be deployed. It's right after, I think we were in combat when we declared it IOT&E. I think we were 2 weeks into combat when it was declared initial operational capability. But they're out there right now. They've got their first combat saves in the Horn of Africa area. So there's a lot going on here. We also have the lead wing concept at Moody Air Force Base. We were designated as a lead wing 18 months ago. And so for that peer fight, agile combat employment is the way the whole Department of Defense is working. So we've been focused on how do we train our airmen to operate not from these large bases that we were used to, but from operating from locations and working with partners. So that's where a lot of our focus is right now. We've had an outsized opportunity to get at some of those things that were just on PowerPoint previously.
How is that new whiskey? I'm hearing really good things about it. As in, the new blades has got improved motors. We were just doing some BFM or basic flight maneuver. I don't know, a couple months ago, and that was on a normal 60, and that was fun and pretty janky. I don't want to say pulling G's because we're not pulling like 7 G's or anything like that, but there was definitely some points in there that was like, man, I bet our blades are just getting bent, and I hear the whiskey is even better.
It is. I got to get in. I was a group commander when we were just getting the whiskeys. So I was a 347 rescue group commander at Moody before I took over as 23rd Wing Commander. So we got the whiskeys, and I got to go out to Sikorsky and do what they call the Type 1 training, which is where you train with the Sikorsky guys. And I don't think they were ready for how we fly that aircraft. They had a limitation of 45 degrees angle of bank, and all I heard from their instructors was 45, Colonel, 45, because every time we go past 45 degrees angle of bank. But the thing they told me is like, hey, you're an old guy, and so you're going to want to fight the aircraft because it has all this flight director. It can hover by itself. It can fly. It can maintain altitudes by itself. It can fly instrument approaches by itself. He's like, hey, don't fight the aircraft. And I was like, yeah, out of your mind, man. If this thing wants to fly, I'll let it fly right now. And the whole time I was flying that aircraft or in that initial training, I was like, I wish I'd have had this in Iraq. I wish I'd have had this in Afghanistan. I wish I'd have had this in these places. It's still got a ways to go. All the systems aren't operating at the level that we want yet. Our goalpost for getting it combat ready was it has to be an aircraft. I'd have to rather take it than the G. As long as I would rather take it than the old aircraft, it's combat ready. So it's better than what we got. And It is across the board. The power, I wish we'd had those blades and the power in Afghanistan that it has. I wish for those late nights in Iraq flying over Lake Tartar and zero illumination, trying not to slam into the water. I'd had the flight director, and you gotta love an aircraft that hovers by itself. It's pretty nice. So it's got a lot of good things going on there, and it flies a lot more. It doesn't break as much as the G, and that's pretty nice on its own.
Well, it's new, so that's not to say that other aircraft that we have gotten that are new don't break constantly, because they do. Having flown with you several times, I can understand the, hey, Colonel, probably keep that at 45 degrees, because I remember doing several flights, one in particular over the Gulf Coast in Destin, and that was still memorable. I wish I could find the video for it because it was amazing.
Is that the one where the local RAPCON launched us to rescue our own aircraft because an airliner thought we had crashed into the Gulf of Mexico?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, we were flying so low that they lost radar contact, and then
That's
thought we had gone into the drink.
Self-rescue is always an option.
It took me about 3 minutes to realize that he launched us to rescue ourselves. Pretty interesting.
Spoiler alert, y'all lived. Congratulations, sir. Rescue. Mark it on the side of the plane.
I count it. We found ourselves.
Real quick because I'll lose it. I've written it down, so just in case. But you had mentioned lead wing. Like, what? Can you explain that a little bit? Because, and I didn't explain this beforehand, but our demographic is kind of young recruits before they join, and then we have some folks that is kind of 18 to 25 is our demographic. So some folks are in, some folks are joining, and it might be Moody might be their first base.
Yeah, I hope so. The lead wing concept, what you need in a peer fight, any fight, you need new bases, right? We have bases that are forward deployed, but any operation is going to require new bases, new operating locations. And the idea is in a peer fight, you don't have these long timelines to set up this huge base. And so what we're doing is developing the airmen, the equipment, and the tactics to really, I'm talking less than a week, to be able to conduct fighter operations and rescue operations out of any location in the world. You just give us a location, we can go get it done, and at least sustain ourselves for 30 days of operations before follow-on forces catch up to us. And conceptually, what we've trained to is that we flow into some sort of main operating base that's a partner nation. It could be any airfield that's a little bit larger than normal that we can flow, especially equipment, and your logistics is pretty key. And then from there, we push out. We open up forward operating sites. We open up contingency locations that are temporary to turn fighter operations, turn rescue operations. Where this wing has been really focused is two pieces: is the command and control. Command and control is a thing that the Air Force has probably not been a strong suit of the Air Force, at least at the tactical level, outside of air operations. We're really good at air operations, but we're really poor at making sure people have food, water, information, security, and those type of things that the Army probably does a little better. So we focus on command and control, and then agile combat support. How do we take our 1H airmen who are focused on being AFI compliant and turn them into warfighters who understand risk management and bias to action and those things that you're going to need to be capable, and developing younger leaders. If you're going to disaggregate, you're going to take a base and disaggregate it across multiple locations. By nature, you're going to have much younger officers and enlisted leaders who are running operations out there and are going to have to make decisions. They're going to have to be in the know. They're going to have a bias to action. They have to have things like orders. The Air Force isn't very good at orders. You got to get away from BROCON and clear commander's intent about what our folks want to do out there. So that's what the lead wing concept is. In less than a week, I can turn any location in the world to a fighter and rescue operations base. And that's what we've been doing.
Well, sir, and for our audience out there, so we did, GWAT and Middle East and, those VEO ops for a long, long time. How did we used to do things versus how are we trying to get there? Because I think as we talk about moving into the future and the peer fight, like what's the difference between what we're trying to do versus what we've been doing for 20 years? What were some of those hiccups that we saw that led to this change from your perspective?
Yeah, I refer to them now as barriers. We try to identify where the barriers. You have 20 years, and in that 20 years, what you got was some great combat skills and some great combat leadership. But there's also some things that you probably overlooked because what we had were these huge bases that were largely completely defended and fairly safe. You had your unguided rocket attacks and stuff that we were used to. But when you look at a pure competition, the ability for the enemy to put precision weapons on a location. One example I'll use, when we got certified as a lead wing, I flew into one of our forward operating sites, and we had a very good red team that was out there listening to everything we did. And someone made a mistake to say that I was on the plane. And so the red team goes, "Oh, cool, the wing commander's here. We're going to get them." And they simulate launch missiles inbound. So the old, Middle East CENTCOM way, if you had missiles inbound, what do? You run to shelter, right? Well, when you're going against a peer enemy who has precision capability, I went, grabbed as many airmen as I could around me, and said, "Hey, come with me." And we went and stood in a ditch out in the middle of nowhere. I was like, this is the safest place to be. And sure enough, the red team struck tents that they thought I would be at, whatever had a comm antenna outside of it and stuff like that. So it's a very different mindset. These little barriers that we have, the ways we did things previously don't necessarily match and meet. And then the ideas of operating these forward locations. If I ask, here's the example I use all the time. If you ask an Army company commander, how much food, how much water, how much different classes of logistics do you need for 30 days of operations? There's no doubt in my mind that company commander would tell me exactly what they need. If I went and ask a fighter squadron commander how much food, water, and things he needs for she needs for 30 days of operations, 2 weeks later I'd get a PowerPoint that is probably wrong. And you didn't have to do that, because when you went to a place, you had to defact. There's food there. You didn't worry about fuel. There's a big POL storage facility. Very different. And the other piece that's very different is working with partners. If you're going to be successful in agile combat employment, whatever the partners can provide saves you in the logistics train. So if they can provide some shelter, if they can provide electricity, they can provide food and water, I'm going to take that and save all my logistics train for bombs and fuel. That comes with some difficulties. When we were in the Pacific, one of our partners set up a command and control tent for us, and just a tent with some electricity. It's typical Murphy's Law. It flooded the very first day we started operations, and there's 4 inches of water in there. It's all turns to mud, and they didn't ground the tent correctly, so the whole tent was electrified.
Oh, good.
You have to learn to work with partners, and we took our power generation folks. They went and fixed the problem, working with the partners, showing them how to ground the tent, collecting stuff. So what you're seeing is you take your expertise from our U.S. forces that are highly trained, engage with partners. You have some very young airmen making some very meaningful contributions to the fight on their own volition, their own bias to action, where they know what are we trying to do. We need this command and control tent so that we can get our comms up, we get on SIPR, we get into the fight. If we don't have the information, we can't fight. They know that. They know that critical piece of it, and they're going to go find every solution they can to solve that problem set. And that's the airmen we have to develop to be able to fight the peer in the future.
Well, sir, it's difficult for me to not listen to these types of things and think that, AFSOC, the special operations side, that's kind of just how we operate all the time. And we have a very, not always very clear, but we have a way to make E4s that kind of flexible person, and to be able to make decisions and all those other things, that the type of person that we're looking for. How do we take the rest of our airmen as we kind of move into this, highly flexible, almost special operations type environment, in my mind anyway, and get them into that correct mindset and that capability, and give them the space to make decisions and mistakes in training to enable them to be able to do these things later on?
Yeah, I'll address that in 2 ways. The first thing we do is you steal everything from special operations that you can. And that's what we did here. The special operations, they've got some adjustments too under General Slife, and as he's moved on to half, they've been changing how they do operations. So they had these things called operational support teams that they were developing. Very small teams that could go do work in an operation. I just stole that concept and put our airmen into that concept. And what it looks like is, if you think about a typical Air Force wing, I have squadrons that are very functionally aligned with the large forces. All your CE troops are here. All your security forces troops are here. All your logistics troops are here. My team's going to be an aggregate of all these things that goes out and operates in a small location, and SOF is used to that. And then you have to have a single commander. You can't have mission command without a commander and a comm rail. And flat organizations aren't as effective as people think. And that commander is going to have to command things that he or she doesn't know anything about. And so first we start there. We know we're going to have to aggregate small teams together under a single commander, have a real clear identified comm rail, give them commander's intent, let them know what's going on, and then put them out there with that charge and give them the authorities and resources to be able to do whatever they want. And the way we develop that in our 1H Airmen who are built this functionally aligned Air Force is by the best and most realistic training opportunities that we can get. So to be certified as a lead wing, we went with the Agile flag, and we operated as many locations as we could across Southeast United States, and had DLOs for every single piece. And then we did 2 dynamic force employments in the last 6 months. We did one to Indo-PACOM and one to Southcom we just got back from. By the way, if you have to train, Pacific Islands and the Caribbean are the 2 best places to go. Highly recommend. And it doesn't hurt morale either to be on those locations.
It's not all bad. That's the only TDY people want to go on. Like, do I want to go to Avon Park again? As a matter of fact, sir, no, I do not. Do I want to go to Gila Bend? No, I do not. Do I want to go to the Philippines? Now we're talking.
Yeah.
The dive capital of the world is a pretty good place to go. I didn't have any trouble getting PJs to jump out there. That's for sure. But you have to give them realistic training, and you have to give them opportunities to lead at a younger level. The first time we did contingency location teams, I kind of knew we'd go to young officers, and we tend to lean towards defenders who have some of this background, young officers to lead these contingency locations. But the first time I did it, I said NCOs only, no officers, just to drive home the point that it's going to be leadership at multiple levels to get across. And you give them the opportunities, and you put money and resources towards their training. I think we probably done about $25 million worth of training over the last 8 months. It's going to take that. We have to focus on the airmen and not the equipment and not the aircraft, because once the aircraft gets in the air, it's a 1H red flag kind of. It's what happens on the ground that's key, and that's probably the thing the Air Force is the worst at. It's training its agile combat support teams. We understand fighter operations. We understand aircraft operations real well. We don't understand the support side. And again, what cost that? 20 years of VEO where, I didn't know who the POL folks were when I went working out of Kandahar. Somewhere. I didn't know, if we had an electrical problem, we just called a help desk. It felt like a regular squadron.
Yeah.
It's going to be different. And so we just have to give them out there and get them trained and focus on the combat support piece that we've probably haven't spent as much time. And here's another example, equipping. How we equip our 1H Air Force airmen. We have basically a big piece of body armor that's the most unusable thing you could possibly have. A web belt and canteen, inexplicably, that my dad had in Vietnam, and a smelly, terrible sleeping bag. That's it. You can't do agile combat employment without equipment. So everything that we do across the board, we have to change from their very basic military training all the way through their FTUs. It's a whole mindset shift of what operations are going to look like.
Yeah.
So from the command level, as people change things, I'm assuming you got some pushback. And I'm glad that you talked about like young lieutenants and the NCOs and all that other stuff. But like, how did you get past? And it's typically people around my age that are like the ones that are like, well, we can't do that, or we
Right.
don't do that because they've been indoctrinated into this certain way that things are done or not done. So as the commander, how do you, as you are that change agent, how do you get over that? How do you get people on board to there's a pretty radical change for everybody. Like how did you make it happen, sir?
Yeah, a lot of communication, and you got to realize where your barriers are. And so you start with the chief of staff of the Air Force, who comes in, steps into the seat and says, accelerate, change, or lose. I've got command buy-in all the way down the chain. I've never once had a commander have any issues with the things I'm doing. I've had staffs and functionals have huge issues with the things I'm doing, but certainly not commanders. So we have a command chain that is focused on change, and that helps give me the space I need to operate. The second thing I really worried about was getting people to get away from compliance-based approaches to things, which is looking at Air Force instructions to figure out what they do on, and get to execution-based. And what's missing there, and what you really have to develop, is ability to do some level of risk management at the lowest possible, risk awareness at the lowest possible level. So we transition to risk discussions. What is the risk of this? I get it. First, we need to know the AFI. But the AFI was not written for Chinese missiles inbound. The AFI was written for 1H Tuesday at Moody Air Force Base. So we start there. and then look at what we're trying to do and why, and then assess the risk of it. And then there's a little bit dichotomy there when you're training and there's not actual missiles inbound. If there's missiles inbound, I might push an A-10 off a runway into a ditch just so it doesn't get hit. I'm probably not going to do that Tuesday at Moody Air Force Base. So
I mean, you could do it once, sir.
You can do anything once.
You can do anything once, sir. You're the wing king. You can do whatever you want. I just don't know how that's going to work out in the aftermath. You know what I'm saying?
I'd be fishing in Arkansas within a week. I tell you that much.
Not a bad life. I hear they're fighting.
Yeah. You got to keep an out plan. If you want to create change, you have to have an out plan ready to go.
Yeah. Got to have contingencies.
That's right. But if you can get that risk focus, get away from compliance based to execution based. And the way you get there with your airmen is they have to know at the lowest possible level what's going on and the why. They know the why. They can make some risk decisions and move out. One of my favorite things is, we've gone, Air Force is moving towards a mission command culture and the culture that enables this type of thing, right? And then conditions-based authorities, which is a new favorite in the Air Force. And so my favorite thing is, mission command, you understand the commander's intent, you go out and execute the mission. And then the Air Force comes up with this thing, conditions-based authorities, which says, okay, so we're calm out with your command team. So if this, then this, which is not really mission command. It's just a different version of the same thing we've been doing all along. Yeah. And I like CBAs. You can give me all the conditions-based authorities. It lets me know where the commander's head's at and those types of pieces. But I can't if-then combat operations. I don't know what the if is. It changes too much and the enemy has a vote. So I need airmen who are biased to action and can make risk assessments and make those decisions on the fly. And then what we have to do, and I heard General Brown say it best, we have to tolerate mistakes. We have to tolerate the mistakes that are naturally going to come with our younger airmen making decisions. And if we split out risk to mission and let them make the mistakes in risk to mission and then hold them accountable for risk to personnel, not do anything dumb to hurt or injure anybody, it's a pretty safe space to give your airmen so they can actually go out and train.
Yeah. I just love hearing all this stuff. I'm reminded of a story in World War II where I believe we took like the Ardennes forests off of a telegram that said take the Ardennes, and that was that was commander's intent. And then like 2 weeks later, like Pat wrote back, was like, hey, I got it, thanks. So I'm going to put everybody on pause here. If you have been listening to these things and you want to really dig deep into this stuff, I'm going to give you, that's already on our reading list. Go read the book Stealth War. Go read the book The Kill Chain. And then Google the SecAF operational imperatives. Okay. So there's 7 operational imperatives that will line all of this stuff out. And once you kind of go check those things out, what the colonel is saying is going to ring true in your head and you're going to put everything together. We did, and I'm going to give you a quick example. We did a good study for our pacing challenge, being China. We're trying to figure out how it is that we can avoid an unwinnable scenario. And my favorite thing that I like to say up here at JBLM is, in GWAT, we talked about it earlier, but we would put a wall of iron in a country that we had full and 100% freedom of movement. We would just mass huge things and then roll in. Think about Iraq, the first Gulf War. We had, when Desert Shield was going on, we had a wall of iron that was sitting in Kuwait just waiting to roll in. You're not going to be able to do that. China has hypersonic missiles. So when we're talking about, we think we're about to get into a shooting war with China, they can hit JBLM, where I live, with hypersonic missiles, and they can stop our mobility actions before they even start. Those are the problems that we're trying to get after. So when Colonel Cook, when Bones is talking about things that we're trying to get after and why is the push for multi-capable airmen, and it doesn't sound like it's going to be a thing, and like, hey, this looks a lot like the Army. Like, I have to know my classes of supply and I have to figure out how to set a base up. Unless we do that, we're going to lose. And that's one of those things, like, win in the air and space domain. We have to figure out how to actually communicate with one another over the horizon, because if you don't know your commander's intent, it doesn't matter how many CBAs you have, you're not going to be able to action. And there's always 3 risks. There's risk to mission, risk to force, and risk of inaction. If we don't act right now, what is that risk? Are we going to lose this fight? Are we going to lose this individual task that I've been tasked to do? So go check it out. The Operational Imperatives, The Kill Chain, Stealth War. These are great books to kind of read up on this. So, sir, kind of hopping back in, we've talked about, you and I figured out just before we came on here, hey, we've totally flown together, and you've seen TTPs change and evolve, over the course of however many years ago that was now. I think it's like 13 or 14 years since we last hooked up in Boise, Idaho. So the TTPs that we see for rescue and, the contested PR and stuff, Where do you see that moving in the future? Is it going to be more of an enabler mindset? Are you going to operate in small teams? People ask us all the time, hey, what are PJs going to do to get after this truly contested PR scenario? And you're living it right now. So what does that look like to you?
Yeah, we're still developing where that's going to go. Let's look at a Pacific scenario in the South China Sea to kind of set a framework for how you have this discussion. You're going to have a high end, it's a big area of operations, and some of it's highly contested, but large portions of it are not highly contested. You could draw big circles on a map, but not everybody dies in that circle. There's risk that goes in there. And with our rescue force, they're going to have to be very dynamic and maneuver around. And it's small. That's the other thing that we have to remember is the rescue force is extremely small. And so our ability to work with partners and allies and stuff to do recovery. So there's a portion of that in the highly contested area that's going to look similar, but it is changing quite a bit through digital means and protective systems. But you're still going to send helicopters and pararescue and HC-130s forward to do command and control and penetrate the enemy's air defense. But then it starts looking different in the rest of the AO. And what I think you're going to see a lot more is HC-130 and pararescue employment in the maritime domain and the land domain. A lot more working with pararescue teams forward, integrated with joint partners to enable us to fill the gaps across the area of operations. It's going to change quite a bit in that way. A lot of small teams maneuvering around and not sitting behind giant HESCO barriers, right? It's going to be out and forward. And that's where rescue is going to have to be because the distances are so long. And they're pretty uniquely suited. I can land a couple of helicopters pretty much anywhere. I can fly HC-130s out of some pretty short airfields. And there's no one more agile than pararescue. They might be on a fishing boat. Any number of things. If I can put a pararescue team forward, I suddenly turn that capability into almost a full-scale combat rescue capability. So a lot more teaming and a lot more forward movement.
Awesome. I want to kind of hit some stuff too. So, AFSO 4Gen has been a thing. Like we've always worked on a JORT cycle. It's now kind of trickling down. And I love how you say we steal things from SOF. For everybody out there that is tracking, the tier 1 units do stuff, and about 3 to 5 years later, then the 2 series, AFSOC side does it, and then it kind of trickles down to the combat air forces and over on the ACC side. That's 100% how it goes. You take best practices from the people that are doing like missions, and then you continue on. So you've been working through as the lead wing, the AF4 Gen, and getting folks ready to go. How has that affected their ops tempo? And I ask because people are constantly hitting us up and saying, well, hey man, it's peacetime. I don't know if I'm going to be training as much. Have you seen any dip, or is it just as busy as it's always been?
I don't know how it could be any busier right now.
Right. Yeah.
I know I was watching was the All About Peaches thing that you guys did a while back.
Oh, wow.
And it said he was something in the intro is like he's a meme connoisseur. There's one with the Bruce Willis from Die Hard where everything's blown up behind him and they ask him for something. He goes, yeah, no problem. That's how it feels right now a little bit. The ops tempo is through the roof, especially down here at Moody Air Force Base between 23rd Wing and we got the 93rd Air Ground Operations Wing with both the Base Defense Group and TACPs around the country. Rescue is in Horn of Africa and CENTCOM right now. They're going back to a 2-to-1 is what it looks like in the immediate future, maybe below. 2-to-1 is for every 6 months you're out, you're home for a year. But in that year, remember, there's a lot of training and a lot of on-the-road training going on. So the purse tempo of our folks has certainly not gone down. And same thing on the attack side, even A-10s and stuff. And everybody's out the door. For my team specifically, in an 8-month period, we did basically all of our operations were about 1 month by the time you got folks out there and got everybody home. So 1 month operations doing Agile Flag, 1 month operations in PACOM, and 1 month operations in Southcom. Oh, by the way, I'm still filling all the absent deployment requirements at the exact same time. So that purse tempo hasn't gone down. What I can say is when you're training for full combat operations and you're training for what you joined the Air Force to do, you'll be motivated. When you're going out the door or spending time doing taskings that don't make sense, that's going to be demotivating. So our folks have been very motivated, but they've been busy, and I just don't know how we could be any more busy right now.
Yeah, and we all feel that pain. Speaking about the training cycle and how busy we are, how do you balance risk aversion and really pushing the limits of your training. Because you said it before, in order to compete with this pacing challenge, we're going to need to do things that we've never done before. We're going to need to employ tactics, techniques, and procedures in a way that we've never seen them before. We're going to have to come up with inventive solutions, all the way from technology to, no kidding, how we walk, talk, and interact. Is, when you talk about, your partner force, we have to change all of that stuff. How do you, as the commander, how do you walk the line between pushing those limits and getting the force ready for what you think the future fight is, and managing that risk?
For me, it's been about priorities, and we have. I always joke when I tell my priorities of the wing. We have two. It's mission and family. That's our two priorities. The 23rd Wing, and every wing commander in the Air Force has three priorities. I always tell them, "Hey, you're stuck with a kid from South Louisiana. You're only going to get two priorities. That's the only two I can think of." So if those are your two priorities, what you do is you cut out as much of the things that aren't directly contributing to the mission or to the family. And so what I've done to the best of my ability is to cut things back. Anytime I can cut things back. One of the things that we had to drop around here, as an example, is air shows. Air shows are nice. They're great. But if you've ever been on an air show team, man, it's going to eat your lunch for a year. Mm-hmm. And, my market down here is not the best place for air shows. And so we got rid of them. And we can't do everything. I can only do 100%. And if we're going to do this lead wing thing, then we need to be focused on this lead wing thing. We need to be focused on where the Air Force is going. And we replaced air shows with a much smaller engagement that focused on school age children, Women in Aviation Week, where we get out and, we contacted, or we just had this Women in Aviation Week beginning of March. We contacted 4,000 kids. That's a much smaller program has a higher return investment for our time than trying to do a full up air show and bring the Thunderbirds in and try to just basically make our money back that we spent on the air show. That's just one example. Anything that you can do to cut out and create space for focusing on the mission. That's been the best thing that I could do to try to create the white space for the training. And the second piece is go out and secure good training. We built, one of the things that we did at Moody was we built an A staff, a numbered staff that gets at wing level functions. A wing organization, as the Air Force has had in the last 20 years, it still to this day doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know. It's a big flat organization, a bunch of folks, and I couldn't tell you what we were supposed to do with that team. But we built a numbered staff that you would see in the Army, you see in the Joint Force, that focused on how do we train our airmen, how do we train the multi-capable airmen, how do we develop the exercises that we need to give them the time and the opportunities to actually train in that. And so it has to be your focus, it has to be your priority, and things that you have to have a cut line and saying, hey, I could do 10 things. Number 11 through 20,000 aren't going to get done. Yeah. And just be ready to hold that line. And I think that's something that we've done okay. But the mission certainly has eaten up a lot of our time.
Well, I think that's where CSAF Brown's imperative, accelerate, change, or lose comes in, because there are a lot of things that we do that are not, I don't want to say they're not important, but that is really what it is. Like, there are things that when we prioritize different things, me doing X, Y, and Z is really important. Whereas these other things, it's like, okay, it falls off the iceberg, if you will. But at the same time, if it's not done, what is that risk? And I think that's important to, like, hey, guess what? We're still able to fly ops. We're still able to train. We're still able to, organize, train, and equip, and all that kind of good stuff. And nothing happens. So why don't we just remove those completely, and never have to bring them back again? And I'm not bringing up it like on the spot. I can't think of something, but I'm pretty sure I could come up with some good things. But I want to talk about risk, because I think that we have gotten risk adverse for a while, and a lot of it ties into it, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, where during GWAT we've gotten used to video downlink, full mission video for a commander sitting back in a talk to be able to watch, and that became the standard. Like, and then if you went into any kind of jock or talk, there's just TVs with different feeds everywhere, and for a while that was a go no go criteria for an op. You had to have a dedicated full mission video asset. We're not going to have that in this next fight. And you said something, I know because you said a lot of good things, so I'm referencing them, but you had mentioned NCOs, how important NCOs are, and that, like, I love that you brought just NCOs out there, no officers, no senior NCOs, because they really are the backbone of what the Air Force does. And I think that's why, Russia's getting their ass handed to them right now, is because they don't have a strong NCO core. And so shout out to the NCOs that are out there. But like, I look at AFIs, or Air Force instructions, for those that don't know what an AFI is, as a point of departure. Like, they are good guidelines. You follow these rules, but you got to know them well enough so that you know when you do depart and do things that are, not part of the regulations, that you know what you're doing and that you can educate yourself enough to move on. Again, I have a habit of this. It's more of a comment than a question, but just I'd like to get your thoughts on that. And I hit a bunch of different things, Bones.
And no sweat, man. What I always say around here is when we break AFIs, we break them with intent, we break them with risk assessment, and we break them loudly. We let everybody know that we're breaking them, and maybe they need to be changed. So if we're not following them, we're going to change. One of the ways, I will tell you what, you start off with this, all these things that we don't need to do.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I found when I became a wing commander is there's an awful lot of stuff that comes to me that does not need to come to me. And so we started mass delegation letters, and I think we've delegated everything that's legal to delegate now. And there's a lot of checking of work in the Air Force, where the one that drove me crazy is I hated, as a young airman, you go to the wing meetings and the wing commander is looking at by tail number of the aircraft, what part they're pulling off a tail number moving to their aircraft. And as a wing commander, I couldn't fathom a reason why I'd really want to be in that level of detail. And if I am in that level of detail, who's got their head up and looking at where the organization wants to go? And it manifests all the way down. There's a handful of things that I could throw out right now that drive me crazy, that things that go to staff and ACC staff, Air Combat Command staff. They're like, why in the world, do they need to know that? I used to joke about readiness reports. I've only been called about my readiness reports twice in my entire career, and both times because I didn't turn the readiness report in on time. Of all the times I've deployed, no one has ever asked me about my readiness. Just I didn't turn it in on time, and what's the issue there? Right. So there's a lot of stuff that's getting done that doesn't need to be done. But if you had to focus on one mindset shift from the last 20 years to our next 20 years, in the last 20 years, it was more important, risk-wise, not to drop a weapon than to drop a weapon. And all of the ROEs and the culture that we created around the number of people who need to be involved in dropping a bomb on a target, that is wildly different. The next 20 years in pure fight, it is more important to drop a weapon than to not drop a weapon. So that is a mindset shift to get you out of the Air Operations Center that's controlling every Hellfire missile that comes off a MQ-9 or comes off an aircraft, to pushing that capability of that approval level forward. And I think that's the big mindset shift from the last 20. It's gonna have to drive us in a new way.
Yeah, and with that, I think it goes to, where are we pushing limits? You talked about some of the things that you did that had never been done before. The weapon school in particular is doing. We recently did the C-17 wet wing FARP to a B-2. Like, that had never been done before. I know JBLM, the 62nd Air Wing, is getting after some stuff with their C-17 fleet, doing some advanced FARPing to help out the whole ACE construct and everything. Like, what is your wing doing? Like, what is something that you guys are trying to get after? Obviously unclassified, but getting after to try and kind of advance that. And so, making people uncomfortable, like that's a big thing. That's something that we've dealt with at Nellis. Anybody can go out, maybe not anybody, but we are used to going out and doing low threat close air support or low threat PR missions, because that's what we have been doing and that's what we're comfortable with. And it's a win. It's easy. It feels good. It's what Lager calls a morale kill, right? Or a morale win. But it sucks when you do high-end threat training over the Pacific and you're getting your ass handed to you. And they're, we're whiting, we're whiting people out because they're kill removed. And now all of a sudden, we lost, or we fratted somebody, or something like that, because it's uncomfortable. So back to my question, what do you guys kind of try? Well, like, what's next on the horizon for you guys to try and push that limit?
We're pretty focused on how do you get information forward, and how do you get information out of the hands at the Air Operations Center, the highest possible level, who can't do anything. An AOC cannot win a war. It can't. An AOC has never dropped a bomb, as far as I know. It's a building with screens and radios. So the people who can actually create an effect in combat, how do you get them the information they need to execute? So coming out of Southcom, we focused on information straight to the cockpit and with no one in the loop. And so from these higher level security classification systems, how do you get the right information to the right person who can actually take advantage of it and do something when they're in the air or on the ground? The other thing we've kind of focused on is some of the teaming aspects, especially in the rescue side. We've teamed to rescue with our OSI folks, which has been unique. So when we were in the Pacific, we actually had pararescue do recovery with a partner nation dive boat. They just went out 25 miles to do a recovery with a partner nation dive boat. And that was through OSI, getting those pieces there. And then some agile contracting. It was actually a dive boat paid for by cash. We had folks walking around with bundles of cash, which we heard stories of in 91. And in Afghanistan, we started that up. At a wing level, we can do that. And anything that we can do that's different, that gets the right person and the right capability forward and gets the information in their hands so they can execute. If I fully believe in the airmen. I struggle with the Air Force sometimes, but I fully believe in the airmen. And so if I can get them with the right information, I'm confident they will get the mission done with whatever resource they got to the best of their ability. It's a question of how do I get that information to the airmen through classification levels, through being forward. How do I make sure that they've got the communication system they got set up? So that's where a lot of our focus has been. And then the aggregating non-functionally aligned teams. That's probably been the biggest challenge. And when you talk about AFIs, they're typically functional area AFIs, and having them confident that they can go out and make the right decisions. My favorite story out of the Pacific, this is when I knew we were doing something right. I think I'm the only wing commander in the world who woke up one morning and found out that his team overnight built a road in a foreign country. They were out there, they were operating a location, and they were at an airfield, and the airfield was torn up between the fire department and where we were operating at. And so they contracted, paid for, and executed a road contract in a foreign country overnight without any callbacks to me, and it was an A1C who knocked it out of the park.
That's awesome.
They just built a road overnight, and cheaper than any road I've ever seen built. So that's the type of stuff when we give them the opportunities to get them out there and get them confident that leadership has their back, and they know, because they know exactly what our intent is. On the leadership side, we are so terrible at getting a commander's intent out there. We don't do orders, or we do orders at 23rd Wing, and everything's done via orders. So if I can at least give you my commander's intent, if I never talk to you again, I'm confident that you'll be successful with the resources you got. We're really focused on how we develop the airmen that can go do that.
Man, sir, that's absolutely fantastic. And Peaches and I here, we're like, oh, it sounds like TLPs. It sounds like MDMP. It sounds like these standardized orders that we've lived.
You want to get me started? Start talking about why we haven't developed our Air Force. Look, so we developed an A staff, and the first thing I said is all Air Force PME has failed me as a wing commander, because we had to train all these folks up. I need a couple of simple things. I need you to understand JOP. I need you to understand how we go through a planning process, a joint operational planning process. How do we come up with COAs? How do we assess those COAs? Then out of that, I need you to be able to produce orders. Again, a thing we don't do in the Air Force. Do BROCON emails. Hey, get at it. Produce orders. And then I need you to be able to hand something over, and I need you to have troop leading procedures. What's the first part of troop leading procedures? Receive orders.
Right. Receive the mission, issue the winner.
Yeah. So I don't know what we do at SOS and our PME, but we don't start teaching this to our airmen, we're gonna be in trouble. I
had somebody, and I'll keep his name and rank out of it, but I basically formatted a brief in front of a non-soft room, right? So I format this brief, and he comes up to me afterwards. He goes, "Hey, whose idea was it to use MDMP?" And I was like, "Well, it was mine. That's just the easiest way to run debriefs." So I was like, "If you run it exactly how you plan, it makes things pretty efficient." And he looked at me and he was like, "When do you guys learn that?" I was like, "I don't know, E4." Like, you know, if I had E4s at Kirtland that couldn't rip off the troop leading procedures, that was a fail. And you're just like, holy cow. But, you know, you develop a blind spot like everything else. And like you said, it's a barrier. When we start talking about an A staff, they're like, oh yeah, I don't know who does this. I'm like, well, that's your A3, that's your A35, that's your A33, that's your A34, that's A46. Like we speak this language and now it's permeating into the Air Force, and it's great. It's great to see the larger organizations actually divide up and have staffs with, you know, clear functions and guidance. Cause you're right. The BroCon emails, they're just highly inefficient. You can't get guidance and intent, and people misunderstand it all the time. So, man, good on you, sir. I do want to ask. I do want to ask something to switch gears completely here. So, you are a 60 driver by nature, and we have a whole lot of folks that are going to try to be, you know, AFSPEC war airmen. But we started to kind of open the aperture up, and we get all kinds of questions. We've had SMAs on, we've had other services on and stuff. So for those folks out there that are listening right now, they're like, hey, I want to go to the Air Force and I want to be a pilot of an HH-60 or the new whiskey model that we got running around. What type of people are you looking for that jump into that seat and are able to be a helicopter pilot? Because I assume your answer here, sir, is going to sound a lot like when we say, what does a PJ look like? What does a combat controller look like? What does a STO look like? I assume that there's a lot of similarities between that and a rescue pilot in the Air Force. So what does that look like to you, sir?
Based on walking around a squadron, you have to be a weirdo first.
Okay,
valid.
That's facts.
Valid.
I think that's the only common thread I see is they're all a little unique and different. You know, we have that motto, these things we do that others may live. And the type of person I need is someone who runs to gunfire. And when things are out of control, when things are unknown, your primary motivation is to go be there and help solve the situation and solve the problem. That's probably the most depth I could do with it, because like I said, they're very different across the board, and anyone you meet, the first word you'll use is they're different. But they're the type of person who's going to want to run and wants to be in the fight. And when the news is going on, they look at the news and I want to be there. That's probably the piece that we need the most across the rescue platform. And then what we hope we will develop in you is that cool, calm, level combat head that is able to take the problem, parse it out, and find the best solution to do it. And is really focused on the execution of the recovery and bringing someone home, and has that in their heart, and is willing to take a risk to get at that. What that looks like when you're, 18, 19, 20 years old, I'm not sure. But if that alone gets you going, hey, when chips are down, when things are going bad, I want to run to the fight and be there, you're probably the right person. And that's probably the best thing I could do. Because other than that, when I was joining the Air Force, all I was doing was making cages in South Louisiana, and I wasn't any good at that, and I needed a job. And my Air Force story starts off with me flying distinguished visitors around Tokyo and Hueys. And that part of my Air Force career, I always had one foot out the door. I was ready to go back to Louisiana at any moment in time. And then Air Force Rescue found me, and I found it, and I haven't looked back since, because it's just it's in you. It's who you are. So if saying, look, when the chips are down and things are bad and the guns are blazing, if you're the type of person who wants to run to that sound, Air Force Rescue is probably for you.
Yeah. Colonel Dave Grossman, the author, talks about that in his book On Killing and in his lecture series. And he shows a picture after 9/11, after the attacks, where they're doing, the rescuing people. And he shows a bunch of people running away and one or two people, which are firefighters and police officers, running towards the issue. And I think that's perfect. That's exactly who we are looking for. From any walk of life, as long as you are willing to execute the mission. I was going to say don't complain, but there is an aspect of complaining that is important, because it does give you kind of a litmus test of, the climate in an organization. So I won't say not complaining, but we are definitely looking for those kind of folks that are trying to get after it.
As long as it's sport complaining. If you're complaining when you're running out the door, but you're still running out the door, I'm okay with it. If your complaints keep you behind the wall, then you're probably not meant for us.
Yeah. Well, sir, before we kind of wrap, we do like to ask folks that what kind of advice, and we had already talked about our demographic and who our real listeners are. Like, it's a little weird when I hear, you were watching an episode, or Logger tells me he watched an episode, or Odie or Wheels or any of those guys are like, oh yeah, check this out. So it's weird for me, but our normal demographic, like, these are all folks that want to be part of this community, or just in the Air Force in general, whether it's on the soft side, the rescue side, or people, taking care of our nukes. What kind of advice would you give to those folks as they kind of, aspire to be an airman, or even, soldier, Navy, or soldier, sailor, Marine kind of folks?
Yeah, I'd say the path to the Air Force is pretty obvious and pretty outlined. But when you're trying to aim for certain mission communities and those type of things, which is the people that we look for in rescue and special operations, how do you get there? How do you get from just getting into the Air Force to getting to the mission set that you want? And the number one way to do that is to be good at whatever it is that you're asked to do. That sounds overly simple, but if you get in the Air Force and you're not where you want to be, the path to getting to where you want to be is to be really good. I got from Hueys to 60s by being really good at being a Huey driver when I was flying Hueys. If I hadn't been a good Huey driver, just wanting to be 60s wasn't going to get me there. So certainly you go through recruiting services and you aim for some of these paths, but you may not find yourself on the path that you joined for. I did. I did not. I enjoyed flying the Huey as an aircraft, the old Vietnam Sound and everything. That's great.
Yeah.
But the mission set wasn't there, and it didn't fire me up. But the path is to be really good at whatever you do find yourself in the Air Force, and to seek those opportunities actively, and affect your own rescue. Get yourself to the spot by being good and pursuing opportunities and letting people know what you want to do. I had commanders that took care of me when I was in Hueys. I was getting out. I had signed paperwork to get out of the Air Force. Air Force, in all of its wisdom, had decided we had too many pilots, which is not a thing we have a problem with today, and offered me $70,000 to walk away. And I took it. I was like, okay, I'm ready to leave. But I had a commander who understood where my heart was at. And in his wisdom, he got me on a deployment. And I deployed as an Iraqi advisor back in 2005.
Got him.
And that got me into rescue. And
got him.
Ironically, how do you keep me in? You deploy me. You send me to combat.
That's all we want to do.
That was because I had voiced what I wanted, and he knew me, and I'd worked really hard to be the best Huey driver I could, and thought I would be a good advisor. So yeah, work hard, seek those opportunities, let people know what you want to do, but don't let that stop you from being good at whatever seat that you are in right now, because that's the only way you're going to get to where you want to be.
Nailed it. Well, I mean, we could probably talk more on your Huey days, because, man, I love flying in a Huey. But you're right. Like, I mean, that's what we want to do. We want to deploy, and that's kind of where the frustration lies in kind of the generation of folks that came in. I'll just say like 2015, 2016, where we were still doing operations. Then you had the kind of, not the drawdown, but operations did slow, and now, we're out of what everybody knows is GWAT and all that kind of stuff. So they're like, hey, what's next? What purpose do I have now? And you said it earlier, like, we are as busy as we always have been, whether it's, joint combined training or joint combined exchange training exercises, other exercises, getting ready for the Pacific. Man, I don't know where that's coming from. Getting ready for the Pacific, doing whatever we've got to do to be ready, and we are extremely busy. So it is a struggle, whether it's keeping pilots in or recruiting pilots, or any of the other career fields that are extremely important to make sure that America and the DoD is successful.
Yeah, there's no shortage of wars, and I don't see a shortage of wars in the future.
No.
You certainly look around the world, you'll go, "Oh, cool, things are getting better." There's a lot of that's going out there, and I think with our younger airmen, when I talk to them, they say something similar, like, "Hey, I had hundreds of saves throughout my career. I couldn't even tell you what the number is. And they look at that and go, well, that's over. And the thing I always tell them is when I was getting out in 2005 before I joined rescue, I was getting out. One of the things that was in my head as a young airman was, oh, I missed it. I missed all the wars. Afghanistan was 2002. Iraq was 2003. Missed my chance. And I'm going to go do something else. 5 combat deployments and hundreds of saves later, I'm still deploying around the world with the Air Force. So careers are long. Opportunities are there. And if you're good at what you do, you'll find yourself in the things that you joined the Air Force to do, which is to be a combat leader.
Yeah. Yep. Nailed it. Well, Bones, appreciate you joining us. I need to make my way out to Moody. Actually, you know what? You should probably come out for patch night. That's the best way to solve this. I like to have wing commanders come to me, not me travel out to them. So that's the way we're going to do this.
What a power move!
That's the beauty of the weapon school. Everybody comes out to the weapon school. It's great. I don't have to leave, except I am always gone. So, appreciate you joining us. Thanks for everything that you're doing out there for all of your airmen and out there at Moody. They appreciate it. I've heard nothing but great things, and hopefully I'll get to fly with you here pretty soon. That'd be great.
Yeah, man, anytime. Peach, it's great to see you. Don't be such a stranger. Text me every once in a while, buddy. I know it goes 2 ways.
Yeah,
it goes 2 ways.
I was gonna say, are you gonna maybe say it again?
Yeah. But good to see you, brother. I love the podcast. I am a fan of it as well. I love what you guys do, and I love the opportunity. I think people from the outside looking in who are interested in these career fields are getting a different look at the Air Force, especially through your podcast. So I absolutely appreciate it. Big fan.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, everybody out there, please like, subscribe, leave us a review. We haven't gotten a review in a while, so either that means we're doing really well or really bad, and you guys have already tuned out. So,
either one.
Either one. It's going to work. So, all right, we're out here. Later.
Thanks, sir.